Grass farmer first, and then everything on top of that.
I think the Vermont landscape does lend itself well to growing grass. It's a default option that happens naturally here. It's a healing plant. It's what our hills really want to grow other than trees.
You get cows outside running around. I call it Dr. Grass. It's like they start having all these health problems over the winter, and then we turn these cows out here and they start grazing again. It's like, boom, gone. Everyone's healthy again. They're all doing fine.
In my opinion, I wouldn't say that sort of grass farming is a new thing. You know, I think that that's how farming was done in Vermont.
I don't know when exactly it was. Must have been about 88 or 89 in there that Gene Richardson at UVM and several of us went together, put in a proposal to the Kellogg Foundation for a community development project. And it was funded with that Kellogg money, and also from the Low Input Sustainable Agriculture. It was called LISA at the time, and then Sarah put these 5 people out working. It was Lisa McCrory and Sarah Flack and Joshua Silman and Dave Hoke and John Winston. And they worked with, each one had two groups, and we had, in the 6 regions of Vermont, we started having pasture walks. 6 of them each grazing season in the 6 areas. So with some seasons we'd have, depending upon how long the grazing season was going, we'd have 40 pasture walks in Vermont, where people would get together and, you know, help each other. And we all learned how to do it. So we just hummed along for several years. Very interesting, very rewarding time. Many wonderful farmers got into it and put in a lot of effort, over 200 farmers. And unfortunately, in about '94, that was the last year of our funding, and the pasture management outreach program ended. And the next year, the farmers got together and formed the Vermont Grass Farmers Association.
There were some dramatic stories out there that weren't spreading in the farming community. Henry and Sally Forbes, they stopped growing corn and stopped growing alfalfa and ceded their entire farm to grazing right on the border with Canada. And there's a drainage ditch that is the Canadian border right there. And on the north side, the Canadian side, is nothing but corn farming for dairy. And on their side is nothing but grazing land. And when we had torrential rains, the water would run off the Forbes farm into this ditch, clear. And the water would run off the corn fields, muddy. You know, this clear evidence that grazing and water quality were inseparable.
We haven't fed grain on this farm for 8 years, and I find it works very well. We were seeking self-sufficiency in one way, and sustainability too. I think we knew that grazing was a good thing, and then we wanted to take it one step further in reducing as much as we could. By the time we stopped, we were only feeding 2 pounds of grain, and that was mainly just to get the cows to come into the barn, we thought. And oddly enough, the cows didn't need that to come into the barn. They come in on their own.
I want to keep my soil here, and I want to increase the fertility and the potential of my soil and grasses. I want to get that soil so it's basically, if you cut into it, it looks like chocolate cake, so you know it's nutrient dense and it's providing the highest density of nutrients for the cattle, which in turn will provide high nutrients for the people that eat the beef. I call it grass explosion. I mean, you graze off and then 20 days later you can have just as much grass as you had 20 days ago when they ate it off. I want to increase the amount of animals this land will support, which also goes to my bottom line, but also increases the performance and water quality of the land itself.
Everything I do here is to improve soil health. The soil knows exactly what to do. All they need to do is make sure it's in good shape. My definition of sustainability has always been is creating a system that will work through the good times and in bad. And this is a great year to test those systems out. I mean, this is a tough year with flooding this spring and drought in the summer, and I want to see what's working. And trying some of these new projects, working with some fine people, I get to see which projects are working the best because it's a survivor year.
Starting with our soils, we try to create the most healthy product we can. We kind of call ourselves grass farmers, and basically we're trying to use photosynthesis to grow and healthy soils to grow as much grass as we can and convert that grass into meat, milk, eggs, products that we sell on our farm. And so the healthier and more biodiverse our soils are, the healthier crop of grass we'll have.
So I think one of the important things to always go back to in pasture and grazing is that some of the real basics take about 5 minutes to learn, maybe 10, but really a lifetime to master. There's a reality check when a farmer is trying something and can say it worked or it didn't work and share those results with another farmer. Then it allows that other farmer to put it through their own decision-making filter and decide if it's going to work for them or not. And that's the part that the farmers really want, is can they take something that they can go back to their own farm and apply?
Imagine if we had started talking to people to graze, if farmers hadn't been willing to take a chance. Like John Rudder down in Addison County. Fortunately, John is not with us any longer, but he had a large Jersey herd. And he became very interested in this, and without asking anybody, he just built a whole bunch of paddocks. I don't know if he was in a pasture group at that time yet, and put up all his fences and then turned his heifers loose, and they proceeded to, they'd never been out of the barn before, and they knocked down all his fences because they just ran like crazy. They were so happy to be free. People like that, you know, and like Mike Eastman. I can still remember Mike on his farm in Heinsberg telling me he worked 3 days a week. He had 2 or 3 hired men, and it was a money-making machine. And everybody was happy with it. So many farm families that their farms were saved by it.
In terms of grass farming, I think there are a lot of young farmers in Vermont, and I think with smaller farms who are interested in these systems and having animals outside and grazing, and so I think in a lot of ways we're going to move back to more grazing. I do think that there is a demand for local food, and I think above all, that's probably the most important thing, is local.
Learning how to most effectively sequester carbon with grazing, I think, is going to be really important moving forward and super cool, and something that I'm really interested in. And yeah, and I think there's also an opportunity for people like me to learn a lot from the grazers that have come before us, because they kind of invented, came up with their own grazing systems all over Vermont and the Northeast, and are getting older now and getting ready to kind of retire, and we need to pass that knowledge along, or it's going to be lost, and people like me are going to have to start from scratch again, which is crazy. So yeah, I think that's something that really excites me, is making those connections.
What do I see out in the future? Well, I want to tell a story, because I think stories best illustrate what I'm thinking. We had 19 inches of rain on this farm in June and July. Now, that's never happened. I don't believe you could ever find a historical record that's not even close. Typically, we get 3 to 5 inches in those months, each. That created enormous problems for us in growing our vegetable crops. But the grazing part of the farm just had no problem with 19 inches of rain. And that's the big story. We are coming into a time of very unpredictable, erratic, and damaging weather systems. And so we better be thinking about that big time as we design or evolve our farm environment and our food system. Our grazing lands here have 9 to 11% organic matter in the soil under the sod. And it's a very thin soil, you know, because this is an upland till farm. And it just absorbs that water and sends it into the soil, and the organic matter retains the nutrients and retains the water, and the streams stay clear.